I was raised in a house with two teachers in it, so my mom and dad both taught. They didn't teach music, but I think I got interested in teaching early on. But I also had a real love for music. We had a lot of music in the house, and at an early age in junior high, I was listening to Beethoven symphonies and Bach and music like that, and I thought about or dreamt of being a conductor. And then in high school, I had one of the most fabulous people as my high school choir director, Don Danielson, at East Grand Forks High School. And he kind of capped it off for me. He was just one of the best people I knew, and I loved his class, and I think it was his influence that kind of got me going as a choir director. Started teaching. The early challenges, and I think are challenges that continue to be there every year, would be scheduling conflicts in the school. We had a 6-period day when I started here in Bemidji, and the kids had to choose between band or choir or orchestra or choir. They couldn't really fit both into their schedule, and there were all kinds of other conflicts with scheduling. So it wasn't just a matter of getting kids excited about music and wanting to be involved in the program. They also had to be able to fit it into their schedule. So that was one of the big challenges. Eventually, after several years with that 6-period day, we moved to a block schedule, and that really helped a lot. Kids were able to have, ever since we've been on that, and they've been able to be involved in orchestra, choir, band choir, and make it work. So that was an early challenge. Well, one of my challenges too is that I started out with 108 kids in the program and just 12 boys in a school with 350, 400 kids in a class. That was a pretty small numbers. So since then we've grown to now where we're at 260 kids singing, and 70 boys involved. So that's been kind of an exciting journey, but over 31 years it's been sort of up and down. There was a time when I had 4 choirs here at the high school, and we had a part-time person as well as me, so teaching the vocal classes. Then numbers shrunk again, and I went back to just 3 classes and just me teaching here. So it's been kind of an up and down ride. Early successes, I think right away when I got here, I started touring with the choir, and those tours were very successful and fun for the kids and helped to build the program. And I always went out to high schools that had great programs and took them around to hear good choirs with good directors, and contest. We had some early success with contests, superior ratings, and some really good scores, and those were great. And then ACDA honored me with the Outstanding Young Choral Director Award in 1991, and that was very humbling but inspiring and encouraging. Oh, repertoire is first. I've always tried to pick the good stuff, music that's been proven over time. So we do music from all the different stylistic periods. I look for music that'll teach skills for the kids. I love to do, like I said, all the different style periods and different types of music, introduce them to polyphonic music, as well as the modern type of music that's very homophonic. But we'll do Bach every year, and I'd like to start off with a lot of Renaissance music, because the Renaissance music is built on melodies, melodic line, and so all the different parts have interesting parts, and the kids just really enjoy singing Renaissance music because of that. And so I try to pick tried and true literature that I can have in my files and that I'll come back to in 5 years, and it's still music that's going to teach the kids what I want to teach them. It should be music that's interesting, enjoyable for them. Where do I find music? You know, when you first start off teaching, you're draw from what you did in high school yourself and some of the music that you maybe did in college. But the ACDA organization, American Choral Directors Association in Minnesota, has been a huge part of my life. Even since college, we had a chapter at our college, and we were very involved with ACDA even in my college years, through Paul Bramvik, who is my director at Bemidji State. And by going to their summer dialogues and conventions and going to reading sessions, you find lots of great literature, and then just talking with colleagues about what's working for them. When I came to Bemidji High School, they already had a chamber group, and they called it the Madrigals. Probably because the college here had its chamber group did the Madrigal dinners here for years and years, and so it was a similar group to Paul Bramvik's chamber group at the college. It meets twice a week for an hour each time, and we do primarily chamber music, lots of, again, Renaissance music, Baroque music, but also contemporary music that works well for a chamber group. So that madrigal choir I've had for all 31 years that I've been here. And the show choir is a different story. That didn't evolve into what it is now, or start down that track of being a competitive show choir till I had been here about 7 years. I had been teaching already and kind of established or built the a cappella choir and the women's chorus, and sort of took care of the core curricular music stuff first. And then in about 1995, I was introduced to show choir through Paul Galsvig at Onalaska High School in Wisconsin. I met him. He was teaching at a camp up here at BSU, and I met him during that camp. And then the following year, we toured with our a cappella choir through Onalaska on our way to Chicago. And I got to watch and listen to his competitive show choir, and it just kind of blew my socks off. And we had a little swing choir called Vocal Motive. It had been a jazz choir before I came, and then I changed it into a pop singers, which was more like what I did in high school. And then from that pop singer group, we started competing, and now it's our show choir. We have 2 of them at the high school. They're both about 50 singers on stage, and they both have a combo band backing them up with 10 to 12 band performers from the high school there, and then there's also a stage crew that works with each group. So we have over 140 kids involved now in the show choirs at the high school, and we also have show choirs at the middle school. So it's grown from about 16 kids on stage to now over 50, and a lot of costuming involved, and competing. We do 4 competitions a year, And we also do a big dinner show here at the high school, which is coming up this weekend, where we raise most of our money for our kids to be involved in the program. We do change our commons into a dinner theater, and we perform. The kids get to do solo numbers as well as the show choirs performing, and the parents come in, and the community comes in, about 340 per night. 340 people, and they get to see a great show and have a sit-down meal in our commons, and that's been a great program in our community because we have so much community support for that. Lots of donations and things to make it I think we figured about 93% profit from that fundraiser that goes straight to the program and keeping the kids' fees affordable and things like that.
Do these members of the show choir in Madrigal have to be members of the concert choirs also then, I would assume?
Yes. I have a requirement for my kids to be involved. There are exceptions to the rule. Sometimes they might have a scheduling problem and they're not able to do during the day, but then it kind of keeps them foot in the door too and gets them back in. But they all are involved first in my curricular groups. So I've tried really hard to keep the show choir from kind of becoming the center point of the program here. My curricular groups are still the center point, and becomes a big challenge because to have a traditional a cappella choir and bel canto choir, and then a chamber choir that does Renaissance music, and then jump over to a show choir that does pop music and show tunes and dancing and everything. It's a lot of programs to run, and but it provides a real great diversity for the kids who might be interested in one area of singing and not another. So. We are very involved in our community. The kids get out and sing a lot in the community. Over our Christmas, our holiday season, we do concerts at the local Rotary Club's luncheon, and then the Lions Club luncheon. The kids get out and volunteer. We just did Hockey Day in Minnesota was hosted here in Bemidji this last weekend, and we had kids from our show choir there volunteering to help out in the community. We are very involved with the community through our show choir, like I mentioned. In the summer, we do a brat feed during Crazy Days over at Ken K. Thompson, a local jewelry store, and they support us in return, and we're out and about there. And then through our dinner show, we have a lot of connections with businesses in the community. And so the kids get out a lot and perform a lot, and in return, they get a lot of feedback from the community, and I think that helps lead to excellence, but not just excellence in their performing, but also in character building and being involved in the community and seeing that they're involved in the greater community, not just themselves and just their close friends. A lot of what I learned from my mentors. Don Danielson, my high school choir director, one of the big things I learned from him was his personality, his way of connecting with kids, because I think in rehearsal, and this might kind of also meld in with the question later about discipline, but in rehearsal, the kids are more likely to be interested in you as a teacher and pay attention to you in rehearsal if you show an interest in them. And a lot of that happens outside of the classroom. And I remember Don as an example, because he was the type of teacher who'd show up to my wrestling meets all the time and be sitting right there, ringside cheering me on, and was just out and about supporting kids in all the different activities they did. So he made that personal connection. And then a lot of my conducting technique and rehearsal technique and my musicality, maybe, I feel came from working with Paul Bramvik at Bemidji State, who I think is just one of the most fabulous conductors and creative musicians I've ever met, and one of the most musical musicians I've ever met. So learned a lot through him. He is one who taught all of his students to get out from behind the piano and get in front of the kids. We did all of our rehearsals, or most of our rehearsals, at least in my junior, senior year, without piano, just using his tuning fork and taking pitch. And that is an incredible technique, because getting out from behind the piano in front of the kids, singing a cappella, forces the kids to listen to each other all the time, to key off each other. They're not listening to a percussion instrument like the piano, so they learn musicality because they learn to grow a phrase and to always sing with a phrase. They learn their intonation is just that much better because they are always tuning into each other. It promotes sight singing. It's just, I think, one of the best things in teaching technique is to maybe remove the piano entirely, unless you need it for accompaniment, which is difficult, because it's more difficult. It's sometimes easy to sit behind the piano and get stuck there, plunking notes. But that is a huge part of effective rehearsal, I think, is modeling with the voice and letting kids model for each other. I do more of that now that that my voice isn't quite the way it used to be, but kids will model, and I think that really works well for the kids who are doing the modeling and the ones who get to hear them. And it kind of keeps them on their toes if they're not sure who's going to be singing, and they get comfortable with each other. And so a lot of singing alone and modeling for each other. And we stress, when I have kids do that one, we're working on tone quality, and I'll have one person's tone who's very naturally resonant, very forward, another person with just a warm, more rounded tone. And we'll listen a lot of times, and I always tell the kids, it's not one isn't good and one is bad, it's just they're different. It's just like the violin is different from the French horn, and it's different from an oboe, and they have these different timbres, and you might prefer one over the other. But one isn't good, one isn't bad. There are healthy ways to sing and unhealthy ways to sing, and so we will discuss that. But when we're talking about tone quality, we just kind of zero in on what we prefer for this particular piece. And when kids are modeling, we make sure that they're comfortable with that, and they're not feeling like they're ever anything other than encouragement is coming back when they sing alone. And then I went on to student teach with Stan Carlson, and he really taught me how to teach, especially sight singing. His kids could sight read like crazy, and he used solfege all the time, and he used the hand signs, and he had his kids do challenges, and he made games out of things and made a lot of fun. But his approach to teaching sight singing all the time in rehearsal is a huge part of what I do, because I think the kids need to develop that skill, and I find that it's kind of sad for me to think that a lot of times a voice is the only instrument where reading isn't always taught immediately. If you learn any other instrument, it's just considered part of the education. Is you need to learn how to sight read or how to read on that instrument, read music, and so I try not to neglect that. And now we have a very strong program, K-12, with the sight singing, because the kids get a start in 4th grade with learning solfege, and then our middle school director, Ashley Sands, she does a lot of sight reading now. So I'm getting 9th graders that already have a great start with sight reading. And so the rehearsal technique, I want to stay back on the question, is that's where I kind of learned a lot of what I do in front of the kids. And like I say, I try to also teach through IPA. I use International Phonetic Alphabet. Again, people will shy away from this stuff sometimes. I find it incredibly interesting and helpful, especially when trying to teach vocal placement and tone quality, because you can use the different vowel sounds. And if you teach the kids the different vowel sounds, you can also help them find forward placement, middle, centered placement, and back placement in their voice. And they can find those sounds just singing on different words, like the word learn is a good vowel to sing, or the schwa sound, Treste. We sang a German piece this year, and we just started using Treste as a warm-up, because we'd use the schwa at the end of the word, and then they could feel that center placement in their face. And also working forward vowels like the E vowel and A vowel. And so I enjoy teaching that. I teach the vowels to the kids and the placement to the kids, and tell them that vowels are a lot like people. They have their strengths and their weaknesses. Your A vowel is nice and warm and tall, but not as resonant as a vowel, and E vowel is very forward resonant, but needs to learn from the A how to be tall. And so we make it kind of fun discovering in our warm-ups using vowel sounds and solfege. Not solfege, but the IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet, as well. And we do a lot of music in foreign languages, so the IPA comes in handy. Discipline, I've touched on a little bit through the other things, but discipline, if you run a really good rehearsal and you're ready for it, I think I'll find that discipline is never an issue for me unless I come unprepared to the rehearsal. So number one, I try to keep a balance of kind of a mixture of routine and variation in the rehearsal. The variation so it doesn't get boring, but there's a little bit of routine. I always start rehearsal right on time at the bell, and I start it the same way each day so that the kids kind of are into their routine right away. I'm out from behind the piano so I can move. My proximity to the kids is right there, moving up and down the row in front of the kids. And my eyes are always on the kids. And we'll move into solfege a lot of times on scales on my hand, and so just keeping in front of the kids and keeping active and keeping them active is a huge part of discipline. And I find that I lose the kids when they're lost. I lose them when they're lost. The discipline starts to go if they are lost in the process. And a lot of times the process that they're lost in is when you first hand out music and they're reading, they're sight reading music. And so what they need is to have a skill. We have to build that skill right away so that when we're sight singing, they can participate. Otherwise, they're sitting over there and they're not able to participate. They get bored, they're lost, frustrated, and then they'll start to talk. So we get into sight singing new music right away. I'm handing out the music. Kids are figuring out what key we're in, raising their hand, and then I start doing using solfege on my hand, and they'll all sight read off my hand, and I'll maybe do the melody line on my hand, and they'll all sight read it. And then we'll go to, when we do move to the music, I have all the kids sight read each part. So I rarely use sight singing books because the music that I pick is usually music that is at their level to read, and that has multiple parts that are interesting and have interesting parts to read. And then the kids sight sing each other's part, and then you get the help then of all your good readers on each line, and then we split them up. But then in that sense, there aren't kids sitting there with nothing to do. They're all reading. And if I do work with one section at a time, I'll usually give the kids an assignment. I show them how, within their music with a pencil, I picked this up somewhere, but I can't remember where, but to circle all the do's and to put a triangle around me and a square around the so's. And then they're not writing the solfege underneath, so which will take their eyes off the note in the long run, but they can keep their eyes on the note. And it gives them a little exercise, something to do, so that while I'm working with one section, sopranos, the tenors aren't just sitting there, have nothing to do because they're not empowered to do anything. They're waiting for me to play every part for them on the piano or something. They have a way to approach, or some tools to approach, either studying the pronunciation of the words through the IPA, or sight singing using solfege and studying that. So that's a huge part of discipline, I think, is that the kids have to be empowered. They have to have skills. They have to have the ability to participate in rehearsal, whether you're looking at new music or whether you're polishing old music. So that's a huge part of discipline, and I think the other part I mentioned earlier already happens not in the classroom but outside of the classroom, building relationships with those kids, getting to their football games, their tennis, basketball, get out in the public, see them in their other activities and show an interest in their other activities. And in this way you're kind of making deposits all along the way into their life. So if you do have to get after them in a rehearsal, they respond. And if you have to take a withdrawal out by disciplining someone, you make sure there's more deposits than there are withdrawals. So always following up with positive reinforcement and using that as often as possible in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Just saying hi in the hall or commenting on someone's new pair of shoes or how their hair looks nice. If you make these kind of investments in the kids' lives, then your discipline in the classroom is much easier. And if you keep them active and the music is interesting and not over their head but challenging, and it's good music, I think discipline kind of takes care of itself. It is amazing, yeah. The wealth of good choral programs in the high school, in the state, is amazing, and we're really blessed by that. Every other year we do larger tours, and we'll leave the state, and it's always hard to set up choir to choir events with groups that are phenomenal, traveling out of the state. But when on the off years, when we just go to Minneapolis or we go to Duluth or we travel to Fargo, Grand Forks, it's really easy to set up dozens of choir-to-choir concerts with just outstanding top choirs in the country, and it's really nice. The kids have that opportunity then to hear such great ensembles and to model after them, and so it's a blessing. Yes, I have already mentioned Don Danielson, my high school director at East Grand Forks. Stan Carlson, my when I student taught, he was my the teacher that I worked with in Staples, and he had a huge impact on me, and continued to afterwards. I see him at contests all the time. He'll judge contests, and another great colleague and mentor for me is Mike Smith from Brainerd High School, and then later at Concordia College. Very, very helpful through all my years teaching. And I even spent a day just shadowing Mike, stayed at his house and went to his school and watched him teach for a day. And I'll tell you, I learned so much in that one day. It was amazing. Jeff Dahl at Wayzata High School. He was my roommate in college, my best man at my wedding, and still my best friend, but also a fabulous choir director at Wayzata High School. And that relationship has always been there and helped me along the way. We've shared an awful lot over the years musically. Paul Brandvik, a huge part of my life, and he was the instructor, of course, at Bemidji State University for many years, and when I started teaching here, was still the instructor there and helped me along the way getting started here for the first 10 years here, and I still see him on occasion, and he just was a master of choral conducting, and so I owe an awful lot to Paul Brandvik, and also I mentioned Paul Galsvik, who got me started in the show choir world, and mentored me along the way, encouraged me along the way, and is still a part of my life today too. So I think those are some of the real important people that I've had through all my years here.